Hi, welcome to Anything is Possible. My name is Tamara and I live at Lake Chapala in Jalisco, Mexico. I thought today I would cover a little bit about learning Spanish. It's something that comes up kind of a lot in Facebook groups where people are planning to move to Mexico. And there seem to be some concerns that people have about how much Spanish they need to know and whether they're fluent or not. And in fact, when I moved here, one of the first questions people would ask is, how's your Spanish? And of course, I did start working on learning Spanish probably about 4 months, 6 months before I moved here. I kind of decided, it wasn't a very long time frame between the time that my father passed away and when I decided that I was going to sell the house and move. So I did actually, at that point, become much more concerned about learning some Spanish, especially the drive down. I had been to Ajijic and Lake Chapala before, and I realized that if you live in especially Ajijic, you don't really need to know much Spanish at all. There is a very large gringo population there. Most people who live there tend to make friends with other gringos, and they just speak English all the time. And in Ajijic also, I think a lot of the Mexicans know that they need to, in order to conduct business, to know some English. So there's a lot of Mexicans that speak fluent English in Ajijic and many other areas in the Lake Chapala area. I live in San Antonio, and it is a very Mexican community. Riberas, there's a lot more people that speak English. Chapala, you'll find some, quite a few that do. Especially, they see that you're a gringo and they do the best they can to communicate with you in English. But driving down, I was a little concerned that I might need to be able to communicate, and indeed knowing some was actually quite helpful in my drive down and communicating with, hotels and lodgings, Airbnbs where I stayed. But it wasn't even then really necessary. There seems to be two camps. People that, kind of like, oh well, I'll just pick it up when I get there. It's just easier when you're immersed in a language to learn it. And then there's other people that are just, terrified they aren't going to be able to communicate, and they just cram and try and learn Spanish before they come, or feel that they can't come without knowing Spanish. So I would say neither of those is really true. You aren't going to just pick it up. I mean, I don't care how much Spanish you're immersed in. You won't understand what people are saying unless you actually make a concerted effort to learn the words and learn the grammar. And it takes effort. But certainly if you do learn Spanish before you come, it'll be really easy for you to communicate with people. But I would definitely not say that is something that you need to master before you consider moving here. People are very sweet here and very forgiving. And there is, luckily, Google Translate now. Which a lot of places you go into a store and they whip out their phone and they'll speak into it, and it does a translation, and you can read the translation right then and there. So we live in a day and age which makes it so much easier to communicate. When I first came down here, there wasn't anything like that. In fact, the internet was still dial-up phones, and there was no smartphones, nothing like that. And so you carried around a little pocket dictionary with you and look things up and try and piece together what it is that you mean. First off, that it does make it a lot easier if you know some Spanish to interact with people, and especially websites. Government websites are all in Spanish pretty much, and if you're looking up any kind of legal information, or need to know what the government position is on something, you're going to have to cut and paste and do the translation that way, and it's very slow going. And so I have to say that it's an ongoing process. When I moved, I had worked really hard, but then of course during the move, you just have to kind of put everything aside and get focused on moving. And then this last move, the same thing happened. I really had to just focus on getting things packed and getting things moved from Riberas here to San Antonio. So again, Spanish got put on the back burner. And so it's an ongoing process. As you know, assuming you speak English, even English, there's words that I look up every single day. There's words in the English language that I don't know, or I run across when I'm reading or listening to a news program, and I'm like, wow, I don't know what that word means. And so the same thing happens with Spanish. Of course, we're starting over, and you have to kind of be gentle with yourself, considering, for instance, if you're a baby, how long is it before a child can really speak fluently? I would say, a couple of years, before they can really speak like a real person. After 1 year, no. But, they're picking up some words, and so that's sort of how it is with us, although we have a leg up because we understand how the world works, and we understand things like colors and foods and names of things. So learning is easier as an adult than it is as a child who has never learned a language before. But it's just one of those things that you just take it easy on yourself. You can work really super hard, but your brain can only absorb so much at one time. You have to just make it a habit, sit down and work on Spanish for, it's been recommended an hour a day. Well, I'm sorry. Number one, I don't really have an hour all out of days. And second off, my brain kind of usually hits a limit about a half hour. Some days I really get on a roll and I can do an hour or two. If I'm really understanding what's going on and I'm really getting it, and it's particularly depends on where you are in learning. But sometimes I can really learn a lot in one day. But I would say half an hour a day and just do it every single day. Schedule it in there. It's like you brush your teeth every day. And I exercise every day. I eat a meal a couple of times a day. And so, the thing of it is you just have to make it something that you just schedule in your day. Now, if you don't care about learning Spanish, that's okay too. There's a lot of people that have lived here 15 years or so, even more, and they have never learned Spanish because they live in an area like Ajijic. All of their friends are gringos. All of their social activities are with other gringos. They don't really have any Mexican friends. Maybe they have a housekeeper or a gardener, but they can kind of stumble along and get the message across with them. But if you want to immerse yourself in the culture and you really want to get to the point where you can sit around and chat with Mexicans. I mean, assuming that you moved to Mexico because you like Mexicans, I mean, that is a real goal, I would say. And now that I live in San Antonio, I have to say it's becoming really pretty imperative. You walk into a store, or like I walked into a little shop today, and there's just dead silence. I mean, you can say hola, buenos dias, but it kind of stops after that because you can't really chat. So, and I have to say that Mexicans like to talk. I mean, they're chatty. And I think that's true in the U.S. too. You walk into a shop and dead silence is just, it's uncomfortable. So if you can walk in and kind of carry on a little conversation and talk about the weather or something, it keeps it from being this really uncomfortable dead silence. If you need to ask a question of somebody and you kind of memorize what the question is and then what you're going to ask, and it's good to kind of be able to understand the answer. And they aren't necessarily going to say it slowly for you. So I just wanted to reinforce, will you pick it up once you're here? No, you won't. You just really probably won't just pick it up by being thrown into a culture where there's Spanish spoken. If you move to a community where it's pretty much all there is, it behooves you to sit down and take lessons and make it a habit, be consistent. And one thing that I found is when I'm doing my Spanish lessons is some days are just heavy sledding. It's just, you're not getting it. You're getting all the answers wrong, and it's really painful. And then all of a sudden another day will come along, and it's just like, oh, you have these aha moments where things kind of all of a sudden become really clear, and there's a little breakthrough, and that's always very encouraging. Another thing I wanted to bring up, those of us being older, which a lot of us living in this particular area are older, learning a new language is really, really good for combating dementia and Alzheimer's. It's been proven over and again, if you do something that's hard for you, you don't just do the same things that are routine and easy and come naturally, and you're not really taxing your brain any, and it kind of deteriorates. So learning a new language is really, really good for dementia, really good for just keeping those neurons firing and learning new things. So that's one thing. But on the other hand, we are older, and I think we all know that remembering things is just harder now. Our short-term memories are just not what they used to be. So as we get older, it is more challenging to learn a new language than when you're young and your mind is hungry and facts just stick in your brain, and it's easy. I took German when I was in high school, and I really am sorry that I took German. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought I liked Germany. But, Spanish, I took Spanish when I was in grade school for a number of years in an after-school program. And a lot of that actually, stayed with me because I was really young. I was, I guess maybe 7 or 8 when I started taking Spanish. So, those things actually stayed with me, but most of it's vocabulary. It's not actually sentence structure or verbs, tenses, or anything like that. So, but but it's still very helpful. One thing that's important to realize when you listen to Spanish, it's really a beautiful language. I mean, it flows, it's got music to it. Words that we have in English are kind of clunky sometimes, but oh my gosh, I mean, like the word for everybody, the way you say everybody in Spanish is todo el mundo. I mean, it's so beautiful. Todo el mundo means the whole world. Even, I recently had some toilet problems, and I learned the word for toilet is inodoro. Inodoro. I mean, it's like inodoro. It sounds like somebody's beautiful cousin or something. That means toilet. And then there's other things that are just like, all of a sudden they kind of make sense when you take it. I kept seeing this word, bienestar. I'm like, bienestar, what is bienestar? And it means well-being. Bien, like muy bien. Bien is good or well. Estar is to be. So well-being is bienestar. It's like, wow, all of a sudden some things just, they just make sense. So when you can start taking things apart like that and realizing that there's a lot of similarities between the languages. So how to learn. There's a lot of things that I did a little bit of Duolingo, and I had another program that I picked up years ago that's on the computer. And it was pretty good. It taught you some words and some phrases that you can say that are common phrases that you would need to know, as, where do I park and where's the train station and things like that. But it didn't really teach you sentence structure, and it didn't really teach you verb tenses or anything like that. It just taught you how to parrot back phrases. So what I have found works for me. Now I don't get sponsored by anybody or anything, but I've kind of settled into Spanish with Paul. And Spanish with Paul, to me, for my brain, just makes sense. It just is very logical. It makes you come up with the words and the phrases yourself. He says, how would you say this and how would you say that, and he does a lot of explaining and a lot of repetition, but a lot of it is sitting there, putting it on pause and working through on your own how to say something that you might want to say. And I just find that works really, really well for me. Going to start going to a conversational group here, and it's all gringos. So, the problem with that, and the good thing about it is that we're all kind of beginners and we don't really know what we're doing, and people will speak up and correct you if you're wrong. If they know you're wrong, of course they won't necessarily know you're wrong, but hopefully there's a teacher or somebody that does know. But the bad thing is that, you aren't necessarily learning the accent, the special pronunciation that you do when you're really learning from an actual Mexican. So that is really important when you're out and about and you hear people talking and you start getting to the point where you can pick up words. Try and learn to pronounce the same way that they do. But I think probably the best way to learn Spanish is kind of a multi-pronged approach. Have a structured lessons that you take, either classes or online or some kind of program that you apply yourself to every single day. And then take a conversational class or go to a conversational group where you're forced to speak Spanish pretty much the whole time, and look things up, if you don't know how to say them. And then another thing that I found really helpful is if I'm out and about, I mean, there's certain words like bienestar that I just kept seeing because there's a hospital nearby, and there's billboards and stuff like that, and I kept seeing that weird word, and I was like, it's just kind of being a star. I mean, what does it mean? And so now I've started, you can't always write things down or look them up on the spur of the moment, but you can take your phone and take a picture of a sign. Take a picture, and when you get home, go back and look through your pictures and look up those words that you didn't know, and try and learn them. And when I was coming down here before, I wanted to try and learn some Spanish, and I got sticky notes, and I looked up the word for everything around the household, everything that I used, put those sticky notes on everything, and before you know it, you're going to know words for everything in the house and everything that you use on a regular basis. And then if you need to go to the store and buy toothpaste, you can just ask, where's the toothpaste? I mean, you'll know the word for it. So now, another thing that I started doing before I came down was watching YouTubes that are in Spanish, and you can look up topics that you find interesting to you. Until you learn enough Spanish, it's easier to put on English subtitles so that you're getting the drift of what they're talking about. But after you've learned some Spanish, it's a good idea to switch over and put Spanish subtitles on. And that is one problem with me, is that I'm hearing impaired. So even in English, I almost always watch YouTube with the English subtitles because I just don't get a lot of the words. I suggest that you put Spanish subtitles on if you know some Spanish, and you'll start recognizing, number one, how to pronounce the words, and number two, you'll just start hearing repetition and repetition. You can put it on pause. You can look up words when you need to, when you don't understand a word, or just write it down so you can look it up later. You'll learn words for the topics that you're interested in. So for instance, cooking, you'll learn the words of all the foods and words for, saute and simmer and fry and everything. Gardening, you'll learn the names of all the plants that you love. So it's really helpful. Whatever you're interested in, you'll find a YouTube channel, most likely in Spanish, on that topic, and you'll be able to learn a lot of words and how to pronounce them properly. And it's something that will hold your interest because it's a passion of yours. So, and also, just once you're down here, pick up a Spanish language newspaper or look up Spanish language websites. So pick up a book, and a lot of times it's kind of tough going, but you can use Google Translate. In terms of the process, the first thing you'll start picking up are nouns. And so when you're sitting there and you're listening to somebody talk in Spanish, you'll probably be able to pick out the nouns, but you'll be able to start hearing. It won't just sound like a jumble of words that are completely, make no sense to you at all. Once you start actually grabbing on to a few words, you'll be able to sit there and listen to somebody talking and kind of like, I know what they're talking about. And it's kind of cool.
Están muchachos. Nosotros la edad. Tan jóvenes, ¿verdad? Tan jóvenes. Usted más viejo que él, como 20 años. ¿No topará?
El perro naranjado.
También allí unos dibujitos de culebras. Aparte que aquí trataban de dominar hasta las culebras del agua.
So, and then also, don't be afraid to just try. You know, if you know kind of, sort of how to say it, it may not be 100% correct, but you can ask for something or say something, and it's like, you know, they'll probably understand what you're saying, or if they don't, you're just going to have to look it up anyway, but give it a shot. One thing I do have to let you know, though, is one reason for taking the conversational course is that you'll be able to get corrected when you're wrong. Mexicans won't do that. I mean, they're just way too polite. I mean, they won't even laugh. They'll just like look confused, probably, if you're like way off. But they won't correct you, even if you want them to. They just won't ever do that. When you feel discouraged or you lose your momentum, like I have, I mean, here I am starting on probably the third time that I've gone back. I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit and go back and test myself on some of the material, because I don't retain everything. Although being here, you know, you do constantly learn more, especially if you are conscious of looking up signs and learning words that are around you all the time, and put out that effort. Most people don't. I mean, most people, they'll see something 1,000 times and they will not stop and look up what that word means. It's just a word that they don't understand. You've got to do that if you want to progress. You have to constantly have an eagerness to look things up and learn and grow those brain cells. Work on it. You know, it does take work. But anyway, just stay on schedule. If you miss a day for some reason, you know, doing your half hour of lessons, then, well, that's okay. Next day, just pick back up. It's kind of like weight loss, you know. So you had a big piece of pie, you know, and you're trying to diet. Well, you know, okay, some days we just slip up, but it doesn't mean you're a failure. You just, that was one day and it's done, and now today pick back up and say, okay, you know, 9 o'clock a.m. I'm going to sit down and do a half hour of Spanish before I go do anything else. So, you know, it's just a topic that tends to be around here anyway. You know, people are saying, well, how are you doing on learning Spanish? And people are like, you know, it's sort of a topic of dread. But I don't think it should be that way. Learning can be really fun, and you know, if you're really consistently working at it, it's really rewarding to get to the point where you can start saying some things to people and communicating what it is you want in Spanish. And just remember that it is a beautiful, lovely language, and once you start learning, it will make more and more sense to you. I don't know that this necessarily inspired anybody to learn Spanish, and I find it extremely frustrating to not be able to communicate. And I know that they find it very frustrating not to be able to communicate with us. So a lot of times it's sort of meeting halfway. You know, I know some Spanish and they know some English, and so we can kind of get our ideas across that way. But if one person is fluent, and it's always, believe me, it's such a relief to find some Mexican that knows fluent English. I mean, there's ones that have actually lived and worked in the United States, and it's like, oh man, you know, when you can come across somebody that's fluent, it is Whew, okay, we can just actually communicate now, without having to kind of struggle and figure out how to say stuff. But I am really hopeful that with consistent work, I'll get more and more fluent and I'll be able to just speak what I want to say, at least most of the time, in Spanish, and it'll just roll out of my brain. That's a little talk on is Spanish necessary? Depends. That's about it for this time. I have some other ideas percolating in my brain about what I want to cover next. I will see you next time. Bye.
Se llama Juana Gallá, son sus naranjas,